Welcome to episode 3 of FCLE Seminar, the Florida Civic Literacy Exam podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Musto. Today, we're diving into another landmark case that solidified the power of the federal government, McCulloch versus Maryland. This case is a cornerstone of constitutional law. So let's break it down. This is all based on the guide put together by the Florida Department of Education. I've got the links to that study stuff in the show notes, so check those out. And don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to our podcast at FCLE Seminar on YouTube. Got it? Great. Let's get started. Landmark Supreme Court case number 2, McCulloch versus Maryland. Case background. First, let's set the stage. It's 1816. Congress decides to charter the second bank of the United States. Maryland, not thrilled with this federal institution, slaps a tax on it. The bank's cashier, James McCulloch, says nope, nuh-uh, and refuses to pay. And the case ends up in front of the Supreme Court. More about this case. See, the big question is, does the federal government have the power to create a bank? And if so, can a state tax a federal institution? The Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice John Marshall, says a resounding yes to the first question and no to the second. But let me try to wrap my mind around this. So I've got a federal bank in the state of Maryland, and then the state of Maryland wants to tax the federal bank. So like if we pay taxes, like Maryland collects taxes and the federal tax. Yeah, I can see where they're going with this. It's a little bit confusing. So the court's decision, well, how did they even reach their decision? Let's talk about the necessary and proper clause. So basically, it gives Congress the power to do whatever it is necessary and proper to carry out its enumerated powers. Marshall redefined necessary to mean appropriate and legitimate. So creating a bank to manage the nation's finances, totally appropriate, according to the court. But wait, there's more. The court also ruled that states can't tax the federal government. Yeah, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. State laws can't interfere with federal powers. Oh, okay. The constitutional principle. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution outlines the powers granted to Congress. Now remember how the articles unfold. See, Article 1 covers the legislative branch, Article 2 covers the executive branch, and that leaves Article 3 covering the judicial branch. So Article 1, Section 8 is a crucial section of the document, and its interpretation has been central to many landmark Supreme Court cases like McCulloch versus Maryland. The specific clause that was most relevant to the McCulloch case is often referred to as the necessary and proper clause. This clause states, quote, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or office or thereof, end quote. Essentially, this clause gives Congress the authority to make laws that are needed to carry out its other enumerated powers. In essence, McCulloch versus Maryland significantly expanded the powers of the federal government by interpreting the necessary and proper clause broadly. It affirmed the supremacy of federal law over state law, thus strengthening the national government. Whew, man, you're really nailing it today. Like, I can tell that you got that. Wait a minute. Have you ever thought about running for Congress? Yeah. Hey, go big or go home, right? Let's review. So, to recap, McCulloch versus Maryland established that the federal government has implied powers beyond those explicitly listed in the Constitution, and states can't undermine federal authority. This case is super important for understanding the balance of power between the federal government and the states. Pop quiz. True or false? The necessary and proper clause gives Congress unlimited power. Come on, you know this one. If you answered false, you are correct. Congress can only use powers that are necessary and proper to carry out its enumerated powers. Join us again on FCLE seminar, a Florida Civic Literacy podcast, so you can start studying for your test. The important thing is to start studying and start studying today. Well, what are you waiting for? Like, subscribe, or leave your questions or comments for us at FCLE Seminar on YouTube. Or hey, hit me up on Spotify, Apple, or any of your favorite podcast players. This podcast was recorded at the Pickens Multimedia Studio at the University of West Florida. This podcast is listener supported and contributions can be made via the listener support link on Spotify, or you can buy me a coffee via the link in the show notes. This is your host, Mercedes Musto. Join me again on FCLE Seminar, a Florida Civic Literacy Exam podcast, so you can pass the FCLE.